Bachelors Galore, 1958. This was an interesting read for me. Let's start out with the title, Bachelors Galore. Nothing is better than that title. It's so fantastic, and I'm not sure that the book itself lives up to the fantasticness of this title, but whenever I've been talking to people this week and saying, oh, I'm writing my review, what are you reviewing? A book called Bachelors Galore. It does not fail to put a little smile on people's faces, and they're enjoying it along with me. So aces, if Essie did it or her editors, it was a very good title choice. The main characters in this are Marty Reddington. Her name is Martha Mary, and I think that's kind of fun. Martha, for the biblical figure who worked so hard and was sort of earnest and stoic, and her sister Mary, who sat at the feet of Christ and listened to him. And those are sort of the two parts of her personality, you know, this semi-glamorous person, but also this workaday person sort of contained together. She finds herself one day in the lobby of New Zealand House in London on Commonwealth Mile. She is just there to reassure herself that she's absolutely 1,000% okay to leave everything 13,000 miles away and travel to a new country. Her bags are practically packed. Her passage is booked. This is just a formality. She sees a newspaper article and the title makes her laugh out loud, and she's joking with her friends saying, see what they have in New Zealand? They have bachelors galore. They have fabulously wealthy men with hugely deep pockets. We're going to go and slay. And unfortunately, our hero is in the lobby too, and he's had kind of a crummy day. He's had to take these phone calls from London typists who are giggling about, are there really all those bachelors in New Zealand? And he's had it. Particularly, we find out later, his mother was sort of a money grubber and left and abandoned her family when he was a very young boy of 11. She lives in California now, probably wears moo-moos and big jewelry. And he was also jilted by a woman who very conveniently fell in love with a not at all attractive millionaire. So he's already a bit jaded, and he lays into her and calls her some unpleasant names and suggests she's a fortune hunter. Well, that is all right, because one bad person's opinion is just their opinion. She'll just go her merry way. And things are fine until she boards the boat to go travel to New Zealand and finds out that he's the liaison officer. Of all the crappy luck in the world, of all the gin joints and all the bars and all the worlds, he had to walk into hers. So they have kind of a contentious relationship on board. One of the figures that we get to meet is the Reverend McNeil, and he is constantly sort of saying, oh ho, you two, you're so hilarious that you can't get along, you're so funny. But it's sincere. They really kind of fight, so much so that on the night of one dance, he can't help himself. He takes her out to the boat deck and he kisses her. And instead of being nice, he's insulting. And she ends up being heartsick about this. She all but slaps him on the face, and she runs down to her cabin, tears the dress off, and throws it through the porthole. This is one of the scenes in all of the land of Essie Summers that really sort of strikes me right in the gut. I can't shake it. It's so depressing to think of. She just left her family, and, well, she didn't have any family back in England. Actually, that's the saddest part. All of her siblings they died in the war. A wall fell on them when a bomb went off, and her parents are dead. And so she's really, really alone and could use some gentleness and some patience. And it's really sad to me that nobody's, this man who ought to be really gentle and really patient can't see her clearly enough to extend that. And it's just so sad. Another thing that happens on the boat deck is on the boat is when they arrive in Curacao, and she decides that she's going to take all of the children on board off to the beach so that their parents can do a little sightseeing. I think this is insane, actually. She says that she has like leading strings, which is, leashes. Children and beaches terrify me anyway. Like, I do not have enough eyes in my head, and I only have a few that are actively trying to kill themselves in water. I can't imagine what she's thinking, but she is practically superhero woman. And she gets back to the boat, and he comes upon her instead of being like, wow, you are so amazing for doing this. Instead, he's like, yeah, some of the parents were out on a bender, so thanks for being awesome. And she's like, I'm sure you were thrilled to see that happen so that I could be even more firmly in the wrong. She never fails to come up with the right thing to say, and she's constantly making him eat his words and eat a lot of crow. That's one of the things that I really like about her. She really ought to be a more temperate personality, but she just sort of lays into him. So we'll fast forward. She gets dropped in New Zealand. Coincidence of coincidences. It's the farm right next door to his own. And the people that she was supposed to live with have been in a horrible car crash. They're comatose. Their 4 children are kind of at a, loose end. And she dives in there with a lot of competence and willingness to really work hard. And I love that about her. But all things can't sail along beautifully. Among other things that happen, Philip has been going back and forth from his farm to hers, checking all of the stock and being essentially the spare farmer. And he's happy to report that one of the sheep gave birth to twins. And it's great news. It's worth a lot more money, and this is going to be great news that he can take to Len Logie, the owner of the station. And unfortunately, she's riding her bicycle through the paddock. The little lamb comes frisking up, gets his feet caught, and dies. And it's this super tragic moment where you're like, oh, can't she catch a break? This is so far out of her comfort zone, and she's working so hard to do the right thing, and she's just not catching a break at all. They go along together sort of uneasily. Enmity has become quite the habit with one another, and slowly over time, she gets to meet the young men of the district, the Bachelors Galore, if you will. And she is a hit with them. She really is. Right out of the gate, she snags the eye of 2 of the highest movers and shakers, a vet who is related to everybody in the district and has a lot of money and a lot of rich family history, which might be important to a girl who is orphaned of her whole family and dislocated so far from home. And the other man is Noel West, and he is even wealthier and even more remote, and nobody's been able to land him. And yet he sees something. Well, what does he see? He sees somebody he can just spend time with. His heart's been broken, and hers has too. So they sort of form an unlikely alliance. Into the mix of all of these things is Philip's erstwhile fiancée. She's been married, but her name is Louise, and she comes back kind of like a devil Catwoman. She's always described as sort of brutal and barbaric and glorious, and always wearing animal prints and prowling, and she is there to cause trouble. Everything she says to Marty is an insult, and happily, Marty is able to stand up for herself and really give it back. In so many harlequins of this era, all of the heroine gets to do is sort of be stoic and wait for herself to be proven beautiful and wonderful and fantastic. And instead, Essie Summers is like, if you thought it, you can say it. So she really sort of doesn't pull her punches. She's going to stand up for herself. We get an interlude where Philip and her think maybe they can start, trusting each other and coming around to each other. And again, Louise is there to sort of constantly be throwing mud in the water and stirring things up. And it's difficult. It's very difficult. Philip is sure that she's after money and she's landed the biggest catch in Noel. And she's sure that he's carrying on with a married woman and doesn't actually mind telling him to stop doing that. They get back to the farm after a family vacation, and Philip hears that Noel's been married and suddenly, and not to Marty. And he's probably thrilled because he was really worried that she was going to marry Noel. But also so worried for her and sad. So he runs over to the Logie's home and doesn't find her there, finds dinner sort of half on, half off, and is frantic about her. Well, she's been using her nursing skills, helping out with a hemorrhage, and she gets back and she's covered in blood and she's exhausted. And after he pours out all of his worries, she says, "Are you kidding me? I was never going to marry him. He was wealthy, yes, but he wasn't somebody I was in love with." And as soon as he realizes, oh, she wasn't in love with Noel, she was in love with me. So then he asks her, and he kind of asks her in a way that's too precipitous and doesn't get enough cleared up out of the way. So she says no, and he takes himself off. And that's when Joy Logie sits her down and says, "Look, he was an orphan just like me, and we lived in the same orphanage. His mother had abandoned him. His father had died. And at 15, he was living in his very own hut alone on a sheep station, being sort of a hired shepherd. And he's not rich. He's not any of the things that you think he is. And he's wanted you to come here ever since he messaged us from Panama." And all of that is enough to just bring Marty sort of to her knees. She's like, "Oh, all of these misunderstandings. We can clear this up with a lot of kissing, I'm sure." So she gets ready to go off and find him, and there's no problem. He's been listening all along. He is happy to repropose, and she's happy to accept for the first time. I really loved this book. It was a solid effort. I would give it a 7 out of 10. So that's a flash flood. S.C. Summers is sort of writing a how-to guide to immigrating to New Zealand, and it doesn't always work in the context of the book, but it is a lot of really interesting information. It felt a little bit like when you got to New Zealand, you were assigned a job, and that felt like the NFL draft. Like, you come up on board and somebody's like, "You're going to Pittsburgh," and you're like, "Did I want to go there?" So it's kind of great that she gets to land in a place that's really going to work out for the best. She's going to have a wonderful community around her. She's going to have some of her best friends next door. She's going to be able to help Philip finish his house that he's not been able to finish because he is so poor. I really liked it. I highly recommend purchasing it.